Just going to let you all know that I'm recording the meeting tonight, just so anything that is discussed can be viewed by other people who are unable to make the meeting and can follow up with other questions thereafter. Just wanted to let you know. All right, I think we'll get started, and hopefully people will trickle in. So thanks everybody for coming tonight. My name is Connor McManus. I'm the chief for Rhode Island DEM's Division of Marine Fisheries. Joined tonight by my colleagues within the division, as well as within Coastal Resources and the director's office. And today we're just going to give a brief introduction to the recent Consolidated Appropriations Act announced by NOAA. Give a little bit of background as to what it is, what its similarities are to the CARES Act, where we're at to date in terms of process and moving forward. And then we have some critical feedback that we would like to get from our stakeholders to help try and inform thought processes and how the spend plan for this fisheries assistance program should look. So as I mentioned, meeting's recorded now. We'll put it online afterwards, and I'm going to try and share my screen really quick. All right, can someone from the department let me know if they can see the slides okay?
Yeah, looks good, Connor.
Okay, great. So again, thanks for coming. Today is just our first meeting on the Consolidated Appropriations Act Fisheries Assistance Program. As you may be aware, back in December of 2020, Congress had enacted this Appropriations Act of 2021, and the act originally included $300 million in funding for COVID-related fisheries assistance. Some of this was directly allocated to tribal and Great Lake endeavors right off the bat. And so resulting from that is $255 million of which is allocated for fisheries assistance to the coastal states. And just for a timeline in terms of where we're at, this first information came out on March 29th, so about a month ago. And since then, we've been working to understand allocations, processes, how this differs from the CARES Act. So as a bit of background, we're projecting that Rhode Island's allocation will be approximately 2.9 million. Originally, oh, sorry, can people mute as well? Thanks.
You bring the twins today?
So as well, the original allocation was $3 million, which with some funds taken out for administrative costs for NOAA and both the United States Marine Fisheries Commission. Similar to last time, likely there will be some type of administrative costs that the department will have, the state will have to take to administer the program, but ultimately we are projecting that this amount will probably be just above $2.9 million in total. Just another reminder for those not muted to please mute so we can hear. I think some people are still unmuted right now. And if there's department staff that can help mute those who are still
Is the weather going?
I can't see the bill screen right now with the talk up. So just moving forward, for the use of funds, funding is intended to address the same core issues as the 2020 CARES Act and providing assistance to eligible fishery participants to address direct and indirect COVID-19 impacts. And NOAA has issued preliminary guidance pertaining to the new funds. The final guidance is still pending as far as we are aware, although this information is getting updated weekly. So perhaps that final guidance will come soon. But the initial guidance is that many of the aspects from the CARES Act will apply towards this new fisheries relief fund. And per the Act and NOAA's preliminary guidance, the framework for the second round of funding will closely follow and be consistent with the first. And just, for those who were involved in the last round of the funding, the basis for the allocation is the same. Same type of data used, same types of timeframes and periods used as previously. And just some background here that they had used, NOAA had used readily available total annual revenue information from different fishery sectors of the coastal states. And Rhode Island's allocation is not required to be distributed based on these proportions, but eligible participants may vary based on the core requirement that they incurred an economic revenue loss of 35%. So, and there has been discussion in the past that while the allocations were done by NOAA in that fashion, states could deviate from those allocations if they perceive that that participants didn't qualify for 35% loss. And so there is some flexibility there if the states so choose. Use of funds, the assistance can include direct payments, fishery-related infrastructure, and fishery-related education as described previously. And the fishery-related infrastructure and education could include a wide variety of topics. Most of them are marketed towards seafood marketing, but could be also repairs or improvements to fish distribution and such. Again, with the intent of trying to mitigate some of the impacts from the pandemic. Eligible participants for direct payments is similar to last time in terms of the fishery-related businesses, those primarily or most prominently being commercial fishermen, for-hire businesses, privately owned aquaculture operations, processors, subsistence, cultural, and ceremonial users, and other related businesses like bait and tackle operations and such. But it does not include businesses farther down the supply chain, such as restaurants or seafood dealers or vessel repair businesses. And so, as I mentioned earlier, given that so much of the previous information and format from the CARES Act is being applied here, it is required that people applying and eligible for funds must prove a 35%, greater than 35% loss relative to their average fishery-related revenues earned during the same five-year period as done previously. So looking at those 5 years or the active years within that 5-year period. And again, a major component of this is applicants cannot seek funds that would make them more than whole in 2020 relative to their average revenue earned across the previous 5 years. So that would be, again, things like considering any other loans or other types of relief fund that you would have received to date. That would be factored into whether into your funding that you would get. And so just quickly, the federal guidance to the states has been that that fewer deviations from the CARES Act spend plan would result in an expedited turnaround for this new act spend plan review. So, and then ultimately allow for faster implementation. So, in internal discussions to date, our plan will be to think through the same processes that we had in terms of administering the program. So, we'll of course develop and submit the spend plan to NOAA with any revisions that we get feedback on from you all, which I'll hit on in the next couple slides. Our preference is to use very similar regulation language and filing procedures, such as an emergency regulation that would allow for expediting this program. Similar application processes and opening and closing period timelines. During the last application period, we did receive a lot of good feedback on fields that we should include in the application and such. And so we'll certainly be amending the application to meet the needs of the larger community. So that will be done, but ideally we'll be looking at a very similar process. And we are trying our best here to, be quick in getting funds dispersed to you all. So what we were anticipating out the gate is 2 meetings as opposed to the number of meetings we had for the CARES Act that went by sector and iterative process of the spend plan. So we were hoping, our intent out the gate is to hold 2 meetings. One would be this initial meeting to get the feedback on the major items of the spend plan that we need to update for this fisheries disaster plan. And within the next meeting or another subsequent meeting to present that spend plan to you all for final approval, as well as pending NOAA's approval, of course, and then ultimately make further adjustments on things that we may have missed or capture other aspects that are important for us to consider. So for today's discussion, I think that there's 2 primary pieces of information or feedback that we are seeking. And there were 2 of the larger issues that we discussed last go around for the CARES Act. The first is sector allocation. So we can keep the exact same allocation percentages as it was last time, if that's general consensus, or we can evaluate that further. And I kind of have some results from the CARES Act to inform discussion on that, if people would like. And the other one is the impact period. And this was a topic that we discussed at length, where we had an impact period based on your feedback from March through May. And we had always thought as well that with subsequent funding like this, that this would provide the opportunity to cover the summer months and other time periods that were, of course, not covered in the last go around. And so we're hoping to seek input on reference periods for this program. So I'll quickly just go through some of these 2 aspects and go through the last few slides, and then I'll open it up to questions. So I'll walk you through this slowly, these next 2 slides, because it's a lot of numbers. But effectively, what we're looking at here is the see if I get my cursor. The first 2, or the second and third column, where it says CARES Act Round 1 initial allocation, is effectively how the allocations were used last time and the amount of funds that were in each of those sectors. So again, the 4 sectors being commercial fishing, aquaculture, party and charter, and processors. So that's just percent and then allocation amount. The other 2 columns are total claims that were submitted. So just wanted to provide guidance for that impact period as to what we received and then how they relate to each other. So the far right column, that under claims amount for allocation, that's just simply the total amount of claims that we received by each of the sectors, not what they got paid, but just the claims to highlight economic loss for you all. And then within those 4 numbers, what their percent breakdown is in terms of, and then just for comparison of how that relates. This is then how the final funds were dispersed. So remember, obviously looking at applications that passed, and then looking at the amounts that weren't necessarily fully utilized by a sector and how those roll over to other sectors that had still claims on the table to be applied to. This is just the 4th and 5th column here in this table. So you can see here that for the final dispersed funds, they were higher for aquaculture and the processors, but they were not, of course, close to the total claims amounts for some of those. So I just wanted to give you, I thought it would behoove us to think about how the performance of the last CARES Act round for thought as we move forward. And then, although it is a different impact period, it might be helpful for discussion. And again, the last question really that we're looking for feedback on is trying to think of the reference period. So last time we used March 1 through May 31st. Ideally, or what we'd want to move towards is something like June 1 through December 31st. However, we, as noted in the last tables, we understand that there may be, of course, unclaimed losses that happened in prior months from the pandemic. So we could have reference periods vary by each of the sectors if that was something of interest too, or it could just be go farther back, into May or April or something of that nature, if we saw fit. So, but this could vary by sector, or this could be kind of consistent across each sector. And much of this I already kind of explained to you all, but we're hoping to use feedback from tonight primarily on these major two decision topics, but we can discuss further other aspects of the spend plan, of course. We'll at least have one more workshop, and when I post this talk on our website, I'll also have a couple of links there that kind of have some more FAQs on the assistance program for those either who weren't a part of the CARES Act, or they may be more specific to a given sector. But of course, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have. So what I'm going to do, if folks don't mind, I'm going to exit my my presentation and stop sharing, and then try and look at any questions from folks. So I see one hand up first, Ken Murgo.
Hi, Connor. I just had a quick question. Could you define the more than whole thing? So when you say that, is that like more than whole for the entire tax year, or is it more than whole for the reference period that we're looking at?
Yeah, so it's a good question. It's generally, in the last round when we did it, we were talking about the reference period, that you can't be made more than whole. However, it's important to note that when we move forward through this program, other assistance that you got from the last program would apply, and it wouldn't be like prorated to if there's overlapping months or such. You'd have to claim any losses that you got, any types of assistance you got last year towards this. There are some exemptions to some of those, I believe, but generally speaking, most of the assistance that was received is what you'll have to end up claiming on an application. And I can let Bob Alou elaborate on that if he has any other further thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Connor. Ken, my understanding is that the more than whole standard applies to the entire calendar year. So if we're using 2020, that would mean that if you were to file a claim for losses in 2020, you could not, as a result of assistance provided through this program, be made more than whole in 2020, which would be defined as more than your average annual income over the past 5 years. That's how more than whole is defined. So you would have to sort of figure out, did you incur a loss in 2020 with regard to your revenue from whatever source you received your revenue from that put you lower than your prior 5-year average revenue, and that's what more than whole is generally considered. It's a confusing and rather controversial standard, but it's baked right into the law, and so it's something we have to administer.
Yeah, no, sounds good. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I understood correctly. Just sort of thinking out loud here. So like when I report my taxes, I have some income that's not directly fisheries landing, well, like be it cooperative research, stipends of that nature. So that ends up in my like final year-end taxes, but it's not necessarily capturing the safest data that we're using for the to like see our losses. So I don't know if I should try to like extract that or just leave it baked in.
Yeah, and I don't think that. I mean, I'll defer to Bob as well, but I don't think that is. I think we're speaking to directly the sector of which you're applying to.
Yeah, fishery related is, I think, the way it's defined, Ken. So
yeah, I would call that all fishery related person. So yeah. That's fine. Sounds good. thank you for answering my questions.
Okay, I see next, Amelia.
Yeah, that's my stepdaughter. It's Greg Duckworth here. So I didn't know how to switch it. I joined last time, but so I'm assuming when you back to the topic of more than whole, any loans you got, I'm assuming that like say if you got an economic development loan, that wouldn't count. And if your PPP hasn't been forgiven yet, I mean, if it doesn't get forgiven, that has to be paid back as well. So I think they discussed that last time, and that was the criteria. Is that going to be the same for this time?
Yes, it would be the same criteria as last time, correct? Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Ryan.
Hey, Connor. Sorry, I had to take myself off mute there. So I guess a couple thoughts. One, we support the keeping things kind of simple, and I think there's a lot of work that went in last time. So we would support keeping that period the same. Not extending, not including June, just kind of keeping that period through that where the major COVID impact was. I think it was like March, April, May. So I think the rest of it, the allocations, I mean, there's just not enough money to go around to cover every loss. So maybe there's a tweak, maybe not. I do think the model that you guys used last time was pretty spot on. And I just want to think a little bit more about the allocation, but definitely on those periods, I think you want to cover that period where it kind of inflicted the most pain on everybody. And secondly, if it's not broken, let's not totally revamp it. I think Rhode Island was pretty quick, in the whole, you look at all the states that got money, Rhode Island did a good job kind of getting the money out relatively quickly compared to some of those other states that just paid, I think, in Q1 of 2021. So I think, speed is probably important as we kind of navigate through the end of COVID here.
Thanks for that, Ryan. So that's very helpful. I'll offer too that, if people have subsequent thoughts, of course, feel free to send them to me. You can send them by email. Then we can incorporate those as such. But I just want to clarify, if possible, that so you, from your perspective, keeping the exact same period would be your preference as opposed to May through the calendar year? Sorry, Ryan, that was just a follow-up question, if you don't mind.
Looks like he might have dropped off, Connor. Maybe he'll come back on.
Okay, so I see.
Sorry, Connor. Sorry, I'm doing this on my phone. It's just a little tricky, but yes, that's my preference. Just keep it the same period. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify. Ken, I see your hand still up. Did you want to have another question or comment?
I think I left it up on accident. But I do kind of have a comment in that in light of what we were just saying. I personally know a lot of people who were affected pretty heavily May into June. So I don't think it's a bad idea to capture those losses in this second round. I mean, I know fish prices specifically stayed depressed for almost the entire year. So certain sectors did feel losses for longer than that initial time period that we already covered the first round. But yeah, if you can forcibly lower my hand, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, and so just to iterate, there's a number of ways we can do this. I think it's obviously cleanest if we do it the same period across sectors, but we do have the flexibility to think about wider periods. So with that said, I know we had a lot of feedback, particularly last time when we were going through this through June and July, that there was worry or upsetness that we weren't able to capture those summer months, particularly in the commercial fishing fleet sector. So if that's a preference, we'll make note of that and try and evaluate that in our revisions of the spend plan. Greg, I think your hand's still up too. I assume that that's okay. Or do you have another question or follow up?
Yeah, actually, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, so I did have a question. If you use the exact same time frame, I mean, how is that gonna eliminate somebody that's already had their losses paid for the same time frame? I mean, it seems a little confusing if they pick maybe like a different time frame or a wider time frame, or maybe extended it out to the end of the year. I don't see what the benefit would be to use the exact same time frame, to be honest with you. I mean, like I said, just throwing it out there, maybe you could explain it.
Yeah, so I think in the case, that's a good question. So I think in the case where a claim was made in the CARES Act and only a tiny fraction of the loss was actually compensated for based on the allocations, that would someone in that stance would want to keep that period open still, because even if it's the CARES Act is counted against them for that period, they would still be able to reclaim some of those losses that they didn't get in the CARES Act period or other assistance programs. But I think you're right. If someone incurred a loss in that impact period and was paid in its entirety, then and then claiming the CARES Act for the same period would not behoove them. So I think that's in our mind for those that did get compensated for the losses as best as possible or in full. Then for those people, looking at a different period would maybe behoove them. I guess I would just add that the 35% loss is still required. So the question would just become how well in the other seasons, or how did COVID impact your industry or your fishing or your business during that summer period or thereafter? And I'm sure that varies quite dramatically across the sectors, and part of why we're looking to get feedback tonight, because some
Yeah,
people.
I was just like sort of mentally comparing it to other industries and how, like other federal programs, basically, I mean, for the latest round of PPP, I think it was you had to prove that you were off a certain percentage. It could have been in any quarter or the whole year. It was up to the, up to the individual. I just didn't, I just don't want to be too narrow-minded to, bum rush this out. So yeah, maybe we should have a little discussion on this.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, for others with thoughts, please. We appreciate any feedback we get. And again, it doesn't have to include only that period, and it could for one sector, but it could be very different for another.
Okay, and I'm not sure how to get my hand down. I'm trying to click on it, but every time I do, the mute button comes up.
All right, I think I got you. Okay. Bob Rowe.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. One of the thoughts that comes across is only about 25% of the oyster growers were able to qualify, because typically in the spring period, the smaller farmers have run out of product. So they probably didn't have adequate sales in the previous 5 years in that spring period. If we were to extend the period into the summer and fall, we would probably see a larger number of growers be able to qualify for relief. The other question that I have is a number of our growers were able to qualify for USDA relief and got a sizable check through a program called CFAP, Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. I assume that would also count towards the more than whole calculation.
Yes, I believe so. I might ask Julia Livermore if she has additional thoughts on that, but that would be my understanding as well.
Yeah, I think you're correct, Connor. But that's something we can look into that and make sure that is the case.
I would assume any federal relief would go there, but
Yeah, I think it's what Bob mentioned earlier, that it has to be considered disaster relief to fall into that category, but it sounds like this would.
clearly, yeah, thank you. So anyway, I would be in favor of looking at a longer time period, but we'll consult with the rest of the growers soon and get back to you as soon as we can.
Great, thanks, Bob. Dean?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, yep.
Okay. Yeah, Connor. Yeah, I think you have to consider that a lot of the inshore fleet really doesn't even get started until the beginning of May. So, you know, to use that the time period you used last time doesn't really work well for a lot of the inshore guys. And we certainly felt it, right through the summer, from May right through there, things were way off. So I think you have to think about changing that time period from last year, starting from including May, June, July.
Thanks for that, Dean. So just to clarify, like a period of May through July might behoove or be better for this go around in terms of assistance.
Yeah.
Those 3 months.
Yes, that's
taking
right.
notes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
especially for the inshore fleet. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Patrick?
Yeah, hey Connor, Patrick Duckworth here. So I'm a little confused when they were saying the previous time. How much, if you look at the little graph there, we didn't even send out all the money for commercial fishing. I think we got 62% and we only paid out 60% of it. Is that correct? By the way, I'm reading that graph. I was trying to get on, but this thing wasn't letting me click on, so I missed the first probably 15 minutes of this meeting.
Yeah, yep. So thanks, Patrick. Sorry, yeah. So just to clarify, and sorry about that. So for the CARES Act, I just had quickly showed some of the results from the last go around, and the claims that we dispersed funds from the commercial sector was just shy of hitting what was originally allocated to it.
Oh, all right. So going back to that, if it was just shy, wouldn't that mean everyone that already got allocated money during that time, they were brought to whole for that period of time? Was it dollar for dollar what they were off?
Yeah, so it would, yeah, so for the applicants that we received, right? So theoretically, there could be other applicants who didn't get their paperwork in or something of that nature. So I don't necessarily know for the fleet as a whole for that time period, but for those that we received, right, the idea would be that many of them were likely made, were likely having their claim completed successfully. And then unlike some of the others where the claims might have been higher, but based on allocations and of course, funding available. I think the big note to hit here is the economic loss was a lot larger than the $3.1 million roughly that the state received. So
Right. I understand that, but you guys must have a good idea of like how many people put in their applications and how many people were approved and how many people didn't make it. So kind of if you go with the same model as last time, those same exact months, you might get a handful of guys do it. So the commercial fishing end of it, just say you might only pay out 20% of it, and then that leaves other sectors taking more of the money. Where, I mean, I know myself, I know June, the month of Gilnet, and I know for the month of, we didn't even get to June. We didn't even get to the first week of May, and our dealers pretty much told us they didn't even want our fish, tie the boats up, and they were useless all summer long. So I mean, I just don't know how that would work if you did the same time period. I'm not quite following.
I'm sorry, go for it.
I said I just hate to see that, if the money, if that amount of money was allocated to the commercial fishing, everyone has their own little sector breakdown. That if we didn't use it, some other sector would end up taking it. Is that correct?
If it's not fully utilized, yes, it would roll over to other unclaimed losses.
Okay, yeah, no, that's, I definitely think, I mean, you gotta expand it out. There's not enough money to go all the way to the end of the year. I mean, I can assure you of that. I'm sure, I mean, I don't know how many people are in it, but I mean, I'm sure we gotta definitely open up a bigger window there, you know?
Yeah, and again, it can, the time period can vary by sector, and then again, it can have some of or all of the last period in it if we wanted. So, or
All
not.
right. Now-
but-
One other question that Kurt was asking there, so if somebody does so if somebody files on their taxes and they have multiple other businesses, but even though they do it under their taxes, like for a perfect example, I plow snow. So now I would deduct that from my end of my, if you guys did the whole year, I could deduct my snow and my other business out of my tax.
Yeah, and you know, Bob can clarify if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding is that it's specific to fisheries disaster and fisheries in your fishery.
For fisheries.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I'm the same thing. I can't get the thing to put my hand down, or remute myself. So if you could do that, that'd be great.
Yep. And just to clarify, Patrick, your suggestion would be, like, do you have like a time period in mind? You know, just something that we can start to think about.
June, July, maybe the end of the year. I mean, just have to think it over, but I just don't. I just hate to see us use the same months, and not to maybe a handful, maybe a couple people might get compensated, and we don't use it all. I mean, I think all 62% should definitely go to the commercial fishing. It doesn't matter how we have to do it, you know?
Yep. And as long as, I mean, and the goal also being that, you know, over whatever time period that there is, that that a 35% loss can be claimed. So that's the additional math, right? So
Right, exactly. Yeah, yep, that'd be fine.
okay.
All
Great.
right, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Dean's iPad. I'm gonna mute you if you don't mind, just to help some of the background. I can come back to you if you have other questions. Okay, I'll put Patrick down. Okay, and Ken.
Yeah, I just want to say, as an inshore commercial fisherman, I also support adding June and July into at least the commercial fishing sectors. I think it makes sense. And I would be fine with May, June, and July. I think you should reward people who had losses in other months, because it seems like the fishing industry was mostly compensated, at least those that got their claims in. So I think prioritizing the summer months over the same months is good. So yeah, I just wanted to let that be known. I think somebody who spoke right after me said they were inshore and also supported June and July, and I wanted to just second that.
Great, thanks, Ken. Just taking some notes. Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. Yeah, so based on all the comments made, we can definitely support expanding it. You know, so going back on what I said before, my fear was that, you know, too many changes, it's going to delay the department, and you guys are going to have to reinvent the wheel. But if, you know, the group wants to expand it and absolutely make it more inclusive with more months, we can definitely get behind that as far as May, June, July. It's not a problem at all.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. And just to clarify, but still keep March through May? Or explicitly June, July, May, June, July?
I'd have to look at the date. I don't think it really matters. I think it's I think making it more inclusive to, you know, both the offshore and inshore fleet. So I think whatever happened in those early months continued on anyway. So I don't have the date in front of me, but I think the pain was kind of throughout the for most of the year anyway on pricing and things like that. And you already took care of, the draggers that were tied up, the offshore fleet in the early period. So I just generally speaking, Connor, I think the department really needs to look at it and look at all the data, but making it more inclusive is probably or definitely the way to go. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, are there any, I don't see any other hands. I might also look, I do see a telephone number, and I just wanted to provide that opportunity if you're able to unmute, if you wanted to add anything. Okay, maybe while we wait on that, perhaps Cameron Enos.
Hi, sorry, I was on the SOAR webinar. What was the projected timeline that you had?
In terms of, well, I guess there wasn't an explicit timeline for when we think funds will be-
Projected application release and payment?
Yeah, so we still have not, the commission still has not received funds yet from NOAA, so we're still in a holding pattern there. I think NOAA is gearing up to or is ready to start reviewing spend plans. So in terms of just where we are in timelines, we're still a bit ways out from indicating where we would be with an application period and such. I think my hope would be within the next few weeks or a month at the most that we'd have like revised spend plan for one last review from you all, and then again getting comments and feedback from everybody from tonight, and then over the next week or so hopefully, and then getting that ready for submission. So I think ultimately we'd be looking more in terms of, my guess would be midsummer or summer for any type of application period and such, but yeah, it's a
Okay,
little bit.
I understand it's out of your control. I'm just looking more towards like end of the calendar year, we can tell growers that we'll have the application period and payment before the end of the calendar year, so they can plan accordingly.
Sure, that's certainly my intent. Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Are there any other comments or questions?
Connor, this is Bob. The only thing I'll say is that there was a request to not only post the recording, but the presentation as well. And I assume we plan to do both.
Yep. Thanks for that, Bob, for sure. Yep. We'll post both the presentation as well as the recording, and then as well as just additional links that might be helpful for folks as they if they have other questions or want more specific information from NOAA. There's a number of different web links that have really good facts and quick questionnaires and question and answers there on the program too. So if something comes up, but yeah, all that will be posted hopefully within the next few days. But I don't see any other hands. But again, you feel free to reach out to me. Please do if you have other thoughts and things come to mind. Connor McManus or connor.mcmanus@dem.ri.gov. And again, thanks everybody for coming. And we'll also have at least one more meeting to go over the spend plan and other details. But your feedback is greatly appreciated and helpful for us moving forward.
Thank you.
All right, take care.